Day 2. Pablo, the guide, woke us up early. It was the 5th of July and the 2nd of our journey. The guide announced that, at the end of the morning, we would be entering Los Caudillos National Natural Park. He said that the park, as it is an area declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, had received special attention since 1994 for having unique and, in many ways, exceptional characteristics, including unique animal and plant species that are threatened with extinction. He said it was a special region, also, due to traditional human occupations and the many natural areas suitable for sustainable development projects. Pablo said that Los Caudillos had been receiving an increasing number of researchers from European universities who were investigating endemic species of jaguar, macaques, and crocodiles and countless plants that only existed there. In some parts of the park, Colombian businesspeople had already invested in ecotourism initiatives, an activity that had been suffering from possible incursions by drug traffickers opposed to this type of initiative, in territory that they considered their domain. The guide clarified, however, that the trails we would follow were safe and that there had been a previous understanding that guaranteed our safety until the Atrata River channel. As our group took down tents and made as much breakfast as possible, I kept thinking about what Pablo had said. I went to him and asked why he had mentioned that our safety would be guaranteed until the river channel. He replied that the work agreed with him would be to take our group to the river and that the 15 kilometers of trails ahead, to the border with Panama, would be handled by another person who would be waiting for us on the other bank. I commented on this answer from Paco and Marcos, and both, like me, were apprehensive. That morning, a fellow traveler's tablet picked up a GPS signal and we got some information about our location. Throughout the morning, the walk was productive thanks to the firm weather and dry trails. After a few hours, we were about 5 kilometers from the river when we saw the sign indicating the beginning of the park. It provided information about that unit and stated that the region was a territory of the Los Caudillos indigenous people, the traditional occupants of the 72,000 hectares of this region that extends to the border with Panama. On a map of the region, we see that, in the neighboring country, the forest vegetation gains continuity and grows in extent, dominating the entire landscape of southwest Panama, where it is called Darién National Park. 2 hours later, we saw the Atrata River channel which, from our point of view, had a wide and meandering bed. In this river course, the map on the tablet showed that around 35 kilometers separated our position from the Gulf of Urabá, where the Darién mouth was. Hundreds of meters ahead, Pablo pointed out a set of canoes that we would use to reach the left bank of the river. Nearby, we saw some stilt houses, and Pablo said that they were residences for canoeists who belonged to the Embers ethnic group. He also said that they would charge 20,000 Colombian pesos per person for the crossing. By my calculations, that would be $5. I noticed that Pablo was using his satellite cell phone to inform someone of our arrival at the river. Maybe he would talk to the guide who would take us from the other side to Panama. I asked Pablo if everything was okay, and he responded affirmatively before gathering us all together to say goodbye and wish us good luck on the rest of our journey. We then asked who our guide would be from then on and were surprised when he said he didn't know who it would be. We then observed that Pablo got on a motorboat that headed towards the river mouth. At the same time, 4 canoeists came up to us and divided our group. Each canoe could carry the canoeist and 3 other people. Paco, Marcos, and I would go together and led by canoeist Tai, an elderly man who spoke Castilian influenced by the indigenous dialect. He said the river was running strong and he expected to cross in about an hour. We asked Tai who would be our guide on the other bank, but the man knew nothing about it. I asked the canoeist about the gangs that attacked migrants, and he, somewhat embarrassed, said that this did not happen in Colombia, but in Panama. Tai said he had heard about robberies, abuse against women, kidnappings, and even trafficking of girls for prostitution. He recommended that we give up the overland journey and suggested that we take a boat to the Gulf of Araba and from there to La Mille. From this resort, Tai said there are around 50 kilometers to travel to the Pan American Highway. He said he could recommend a boatman who would charge $200 per person for the trip and that it would last 2 days. Before the crossing, we decided to gather the entire group and give everyone information about Tai so that, if possible, they could decide. Before leaving Medellin, I had researched the documentation required to enter Panama, which, in addition to a valid passport, includes proof of return or onward tickets, a minimum postage of $500 per person, information about the destination address in country and proof of vaccination. I thought about it, being sure that I would be the only one in our group to have most of these requirements, but neither did I have a return ticket or a destination address in Panama. Given the impatience of the canoeist who had been waiting for us until then, I asked Tai what entry into Panama would be like if we entered through La Mille, and the canoeist replied that there would be no controls there, but that this could happen along the Pan American Highway. Finally, Marcos and Paco and 3 others decided to cross immediately and continue land. Until we left the right bank, the 3 couples were still discussing the possibilities. I then worried about the possibility of delaying the continuation of our walk until the end of the afternoon. The canoeist offered us fruit and water, and that was our lunch. I had never eaten a meal aboard a canoe under the scorching sun. There was no protection from the trees that had shaded our path to the river. Nothing that a hat couldn't alleviate, but the heat reflected in the brown water of the Atrata River burned our skin and the steam obscured our vision. Around 3 p.m. we arrived at the opposite bank, paid for the crossing, and the canoeist showed us where the trail would be to follow towards the border. We then asked about the new guide, and Tai said he knew nothing about it. Perplexed, now there were 6 of us thinking about a solution and waiting for the rest of the group who hadn't even started the crossing yet.